The massive space station turned slowly in the dark void between stars. Omega-7 was bigger than most cities on Earth. It had been built by dozens of different alien races working together. The metal walls showed strange patterns and colors that human eyes found hard to understand. Ambassador Kang Minho walked through the long halls of the station. His black suit looked simple next to the bright robes and strange armor worn by the other beings around him. Some had too many arms. Others had skin that changed colors as they moved. A few floated in the air without touching the ground at all. Minho had been Earth's voice in the Galactic Council for 3 years now. He still felt amazed every time he saw the different types of life that filled the galaxy. Humans had only learned about aliens 5 years ago. Before that, they thought they were alone in the universe. The emergency meeting hall was huge. Hundreds of different species sat in rows that went up to the ceiling. Each race had their own special seats that fit their bodies. The humans got simple chairs that looked tiny compared to everything else. Elder Thaisara stood at the center of the room. She was one of the ethereal collective, a race so old that no one remembered when they first reached the stars. Her body looked like it was made of light and mist. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Members of the Council," she began, "we face a crisis that threatens the peace we have kept for 200 years. The room became quiet. Even the translator devices stopped their soft humming. "The Vorthak Empire has declared war on the Zalani Federation," Thaisara continued. "They demand complete surrender within 1 standard month. If the Zalani refuse, the Vorthak will destroy every world in their territory." Minho felt his stomach drop. He had met the Zalani before. They were gentle people who looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin. They spent their time healing others and growing beautiful gardens. The idea of anyone wanting to hurt them made him angry. A large, scaly being stood up. This was General Corks of the Titan Union. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "The Vorthak have a strong army. They have conquered 12 systems in the past 50 years. Why should we risk our own people to save the Zalani?" "Because the Zalani have something the Vorthak want," Thaisara replied. "Medical technology that can heal any wound and cure any disease. If the Vorthak control this knowledge, they will become too powerful for any of us to stop." Minho raised his hand. The translator device on his collar turned his words into sounds that all the different species could understand. "What kind of help does the Zalani Federation need?" A new figure appeared in the center of the room. It was a hologram of a Zalani female. Her name was Mirthala, and she was the leader of her people. Tears that looked like liquid silver ran down her face. "Honored council members," she said, "my people do not know how to fight. We have never needed armies or weapons. Our worlds have no soldiers, no warships, no defense systems. When the Vorthak come, we will have nothing to stop them. The Zalani request military assistance," Thaisara explained. "We need member species to send troops to defend their worlds." Different species began talking among themselves. The sound was like a zoo where all the animals had learned to speak. Some voices were high and musical. Others were so deep they made the floor shake. A being that looked like a walking tree spoke for the Nature Alliance. "We will send 10,000 ground troops and 50 warships." The Nexus Coalition promised 20,000 soldiers and 100 ships. One by one, each major power offered their help. The numbers were huge. By the time they finished, over 100,000 troops from dozens of species would defend the Zalani worlds. Then Thaisara looked at Minho. "What can Earth offer?" Minho felt embarrassed. Earth was still new to galactic politics. Humans had only a few ships that could travel between stars. Their military was designed to fight other humans, not alien armies. "We can send 200 soldiers," he said. "They are our best. But I know it is not much compared to what others are giving." Some of the alien delegates made sounds that the translator said meant laughter. To them, humans were just another new species that had recently learned to leave their home planet. Earth was small and far from important trade routes. Most council members barely knew humans existed. "Every soldier matters," Mirthala said kindly. "We welcome Earth's help." After the meeting ended, Minho sent a message back to Earth. Within hours, he got a reply from the Earth Defense Force headquarters. Captain Lee Jiho would lead the human force. Minho had heard of him before. Jiho was known for being smart and calm under pressure. He had fought in the Asian water wars and the Arctic border conflict. If Earth was going to send anyone to fight aliens, Jiho was a good choice. Dr. Park Suna would also join the mission. She was a scientist who studied how different life forms lived and grew. The Earth government thought this would be a good chance for her to learn about alien biology. 3 days later, Minho watched as the human transport ship docked with Omega-7. It was small compared to the other military vessels gathering for the mission. The ship looked basic and simple next to the beautiful designs of alien technology. Captain Lee Jiho stepped off the ship first. He was a tall man with serious eyes and graying hair. Behind him came 200 soldiers in dark green uniforms. They looked young and nervous. Most of them had never been off Earth before. Dr. Park Suna was a small woman with quick eyes that seemed to notice everything. She carried a bag full of scientific equipment and had a camera that could record in dozens of different light spectrums. "Captain Lee," Minho said as they met in the docking bay. "Are your people ready for this?" Jiho looked around at the alien ships and soldiers preparing for war. Some wore powered armor that made them 3 times taller than humans. Others carried energy weapons that could melt metal. The scale of everything was overwhelming. "We will do our job," Jiho said simply. "Humans know how to adapt." Dr. Suna was already taking pictures of everything she saw. "This is amazing," she whispered. "Look at how they design their equipment. Each species has completely different ideas about warfare." The combined fleet left Omega-7 2 days later. It was the largest military force assembled in over a century. Ships from dozens of worlds flew together toward Zalani space. The human transport stayed in the middle of the formation, protected by more advanced vessels. As they traveled through hyperspace, Jiho studied reports about the Vorthak Empire. They were a reptilian species that valued strength above all else. Their society was built around conquest and military power. They had never lost a major war. The Vorthak army waiting for them had 50,000 troops, 500 warships, and weapons that could destroy entire cities. Against this force, the council was sending everything they had. Jiho looked at his own soldiers. They were checking their equipment and trying to learn basic alien languages. Most of them came from Earth's special forces. They were tough and well-trained, but they had no idea what they were about to face. Neither did anyone else. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Zelos Prime, the main world of the Zalani Federation. It was a beautiful planet covered in blue oceans and green continents. Cities that looked like works of art covered the land. There were no military bases, no weapon factories, no signs that this was a world preparing for war. Mirthala met them at the spaceport. She looked even more fragile in person than she had in the hologram. Her people gathered around the landing ships, staring in wonder at the alien soldiers who had come to defend them. "Thank you," she said to each military leader as they stepped off their ships. When she reached Captain Jiho, she stopped and studied his face. "You look like you understand pain," she said softly. "All humans do," Jiho replied. "We learn it early." As the Council forces set up their bases around Zelos Prime, Dr. Suna began her research. She interviewed soldiers from different species and studied their weapons and tactics. What she found surprised her. Most alien warfare was formal and predictable. Armies faced each other in open battles. They fought with honor and followed strict rules. Wars were like giant games with agreed-upon rules that everyone followed. "How do humans fight wars?" asked a curious officer from the Nexus Coalition. Dr. Suna thought about Earth's history. Thousands of years of constant warfare. Humans fighting. Humans in every possible way. No rules that someone had not broken. No tactic too cruel or clever to try. "Differently," she said finally. 3 days after they arrived on Zelos Prime, long-range sensors detected the Vorthak fleet approaching. It was massive and dark, like a swarm of metal insects moving through space. The war was about to begin. The Vorthak fleet filled the sky above Zelos Prime like a dark cloud. Their ships were built for war, covered in spikes and heavy armor. Each vessel looked like it wanted to bite something. General Krexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the planet below. He was 8 feet tall with scales that had turned black with age. Scars covered his arms and face, each one a story of past victories. 50,000 warriors, he said to his second-in-command, against 15,000 mixed council forces. This will be over in 3 days. The Vorthak had studied their enemies. The Nature Alliance troops were tough, but slow. The Nexus Coalition had good technology but no real fighting experience. The Titan Union soldiers were strong but followed predictable patterns. "What about the humans?" asked Commander Vostek, a younger Vorthak with bright green scales. Krexthar made a sound like rocks falling. It was how his people laughed. 200 primitives from a backwater world. They are not worth thinking about. The invasion began at dawn. Vorthak drop ships fell through the atmosphere like burning meteors. They landed in the fields around Zalani cities and began setting up bases. Within hours, the first battles started. Captain Lee Jiho stood in the command center that the council forces had built outside the Zalani capital. Holographic displays showed red dots where Vorthak forces were landing. There were so many dots that parts of the map looked solid red. "Initial contact reports coming in," said Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun, Jiho's communications officer. "The Nature Alliance is engaging Vorthak forces at Landing Zone Alpha. Heavy casualties on both sides." On the main screen, they could see the battle happening in real time. The Nature Alliance troops fought bravely, but the Vorthak were pushing them back. Energy weapons lit up the sky as massive alien warriors clashed across the landscape. "The Nexus Coalition is requesting support at Landing Zone Beta," Do-hyun continued. "They are outnumbered 3-1. Jiho studied the tactical display. The council forces were spread too thin. They were trying to defend everything and would end up saving nothing. "Sir," said Sergeant O. Tajan, the leader of Jiho's scout teams, "what are our orders?" Jiho looked at his small force of human soldiers. They were vastly outnumbered by both their allies and their enemies. In a conventional battle, they would make no difference at all. "We do what humans do best," Jiho said quietly. "We adapt." While the main armies fought their formal battles, Jiho sent his people to do something different. Instead of rushing toward the enemy, they moved carefully through the forests and hills around the landing zones. They watched and learned. Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun led a patrol to observe Landing Zone Gamma, where 1,000 Vorthak were building a forward base. He and his team hid in the thick alien trees for 6 hours, studying how the enemy worked. "They follow the same patterns every time," he whispered into his radio. "Guards change every 2 hours. Supply ships land every 4 hours in the same spot. They always build their command center in the exact middle of their base." This was information the other council species had not thought to gather. They were too busy fighting to watch and learn. Dr. Park Suna followed the human patrols with her scientific equipment. She was supposed to study alien biology, but she found herself studying something else instead. She watched how the humans moved through enemy territory like ghosts, how they seemed to know where to go without talking to each other, how they could stay perfectly still for hours if they needed to. "How do you know how to do this?" she asked. Corporal Yoon Minji, a sniper who had been watching a Vorthak patrol for 3 hours without moving. "Practice," Minji said simply. "Humans have been hunting each other for thousands of years. We know how to be quiet." On the second day of the invasion, the Vorthak made their first major attack. 5,000 warriors charged directly at the Yabiba main council defensive line. It was supposed to be an overwhelming assault that would break the enemy's will to fight. The battle was fierce. The Nature Alliance and Nexus Coalition fought hard, but they were being pushed back. Just when it looked like the line would break, something unexpected happened. Explosions began going off behind the Vorthak lines. Their supply depot erupted in flames. Their communications tower fell over. 3 of their troop transports exploded at the same time. Commander Vosathek tried to contact his rear guard. There was no answer. He sent a squad to investigate. They found the guards unconscious, tied up with their own equipment. No one had seen or heard anything. "How is this possible?" Vosathek demanded. That was when he noticed something else. Vorthak soldiers were disappearing, not dying in battle, but simply vanishing. A patrol would report in, then nothing. A sentry would be at his post 1 minute and gone the next. The human soldiers were hunting. Sergeant O. Tajan moved through the enemy base like a shadow. He had learned that Vorthak guards always looked forward, never up, so he climbed. He used trees, building tops, anything that gave him height. From above, he could see patterns that enemies on the ground missed. When he found a lone sentry, he did not kill him. Instead, he used techniques learned from Earth's special forces, pressure points that made Vorthak fall unconscious. Silent, takedowns that left no trace. But the humans did more than just eliminate guards. They began playing with their enemies' minds. Private Nam Jiwan was an expert in psychological warfare. She left messages written in Vorthak language in places where only enemy soldiers would find them. The messages said things like, "We are watching you," and "You are already dead." She planted devices that made strange sounds in the night, noises that the Vorthak could not identify but that made them nervous. She moved equipment around so that guards would find their weapons in different places than where they left them. Within 3 days, the Vorthak rear areas were filled with frightened soldiers who jumped at every shadow. "Something is wrong with the humans," Commander Vostek reported to General Krexthar. "They do not fight like the other species." "Explain," Krexthar growled. "They do not attack our strong points. They do not challenge us to honorable combat. Instead, Vostek struggled to find words. "They make us afraid of the dark." Dr. Park Suna was documenting everything she saw. Her reports back to Earth were filled with observations that disturbed her. "The human soldiers show no fear," she wrote. "When other species retreat, humans advance. When others attack in groups, humans work alone. They seem to enjoy the challenge of being outnumbered." She watched Corporal Yoon Minji set up a sniper position on a hill overlooking a Vorthak supply route. Within 6 hours, Minji had eliminated 12 enemy officers. Each shot was perfectly placed. Each kill made the surviving Vorthak more afraid to leave their vehicles. "How many have you killed?" Dr. Suna asked. Minji thought for a moment. "I stopped counting after 30. Numbers do not matter. What matters is making them afraid to move." The strangest thing, Dr. Suna observed, was how humans fought when they were wounded. Other species became less effective when injured. They retreated to medical stations and followed proper procedures for treatment. Humans did the opposite. Engineer Choi Hyunwoo had figured out how to connect human medical technology with Zilani healing devices. The combination worked better than either system alone. Wounded human soldiers were back in action within hours, often more aggressive than before they were hurt. "Pain makes us angry," Corporal Yoon Minji explained. "Anger makes us dangerous." By the end of the first week, the Vorthak invasion was stalled. Their carefully planned assault had turned into a nightmare of missing soldiers, destroyed supplies, and growing fear. General Krexthar stood in his command center and stared at the tactical display. The red dots representing his forces had stopped moving forward. Some were actually moving backward. "Report," he demanded. "Sir," Commander Vostek said carefully, "we have lost over 3,000 soldiers, but we have only recovered 800 bodies. What happened to the others?" "We do not know, sir. They simply disappear." Krexthar felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare: uncertainty. His armies had conquered world after world, using overwhelming force and direct assault. Those tactics had always worked before. Are the humans responsible for this? "We believe so, sir, but we do not understand how. Our scouts report seeing them in impossible places. They appear where our sensors say no one should be able to go. They attack from directions that should be empty." That night, Krexthar decided to end the human problem once and for all. He ordered a full regiment, 5,000 of his best warriors, to locate and destroy the human forces. The regiment never reported back. The next morning, Vorthak patrols found them scattered across 50 square miles. All were alive but unconscious. They had been stripped of their weapons and equipment. Written on their armor in their own language were the words, "Go home while you still can." For the first time in his military career, General Krexthar began to wonder if he had made a mistake. Dr. Park Suna made her most disturbing observation that same day. She realized that the humans were not fighting at their full capacity. They were operating under strict rules about what weapons they could use and what targets they could attack. Captain Lee Jiho had forbidden his people from using several types of equipment they had brought from Earth. he had declared entire categories of tactics off-limits. The Vorthak Command Center was supposed to be impregnable. It sat on top of a hill surrounded by 3 rings of defenses. Energy shields protected it from air attacks. Motion sensors covered every approach. 500 elite guards watched the perimeter. Sergeant Taijin studied the base through his scope from 2 miles away. He had been watching for 18 hours, learning the patterns, guard rotations, supply deliveries, shift changes, weak spots that the designers never thought about. "Command, this is Recon Team Alpha," he whispered into his radio. "I have a plan." Captain Lee Jiho listened to the proposal and felt impressed despite himself. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was completely impossible by any reasonable military standard. "Do it," he said. Taijin began his approach at sunset. He moved alone, carrying only basic equipment. No heavy weapons, no advanced technology. Just tools that any human Special Forces soldier would recognize. The first ring of defenses was electronic. Motion sensors and heat detectors that could spot anything larger than a small animal. Taijin had studied how these devices worked. More importantly, he had studied how they failed. Every sensor had blind spots. Tiny gaps in coverage that the Vorthak engineers had not noticed. Taijin found them all. He moved through the sensor field like water flowing around stones, never staying in one place long enough to trigger an alarm. The second ring was physical barriers, walls, trenches, and obstacles designed to channel attackers into killing zones. These defenses worked well against armies, but had not been designed to stop one person who was willing to be creative. Taijin did not go around the obstacles. He went under them. Using techniques learned from urban warfare on Earth, he tunneled beneath the defensive line. It took him 6 hours of silent digging, but he emerged inside the second ring without being detected. The third ring was the guards themselves, elite Vorthak warriors who had never failed to protect a target. They were alert, well-trained, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Taijin did not try to fight them. Instead, he used their own psychology against them. Vorthak were pack hunters who relied on group coordination. They stayed in contact with each other through constant communication. He began by disrupting their radios. Small devices placed near their equipment created just enough interference to make communication difficult. The guards had to speak louder, to hear each other, which meant they could not hear other sounds as clearly. Next, he created distractions. Noises in the distance that drew guards away from their posts. Shadows that moved just at the edge of vision. By the time the guards realized something was wrong, Taijin was already inside their perimeter. The command center itself was a fortress within a fortress. Thick walls, sealed doors, and internal security systems that should have made infiltration impossible. Taijin found a way in through the ventilation system. Vorthak were reptilian and cold-blooded. Their environmental systems were designed to keep buildings warm. The air ducts were larger than those found on human ships, and the interior sensors were set to detect warm-blooded intruders. Taijin had prepared for this. He wore a special suit that matched his body temperature to the surrounding air. To the sensors, he was invisible. He crawled through the ventilation system for over an hour, mapping the building's interior. When he finally dropped into the main command room, 12 Vorthak officers were planning their next assault. Maps and tactical displays filled the room. Communication equipment connected them to forces across the planet. "Good evening," Taijin said politely in their language. He had learned basic Vorthak during the journey to Zelos Prime. The officers turned and stared. One reached for his weapon. Taijin was faster. Not to kill, but to incapacitate. Human martial arts techniques that targeted nerve clusters and pressure points. Within 30 seconds, all 12 officers were unconscious on the floor. Taijin spent the next hour in the command center alone. He copied their battle plans. He learned their troop positions. He discovered their supply schedules and reinforcement timetables. Most importantly, he found their communication codes. Then he began sending new orders. Using the Vorthak's own communication system, Taijin redirected supply convoys to empty coordinates. He ordered patrols to search areas where no enemies were hiding. He told reserve units to move to positions where they would be useless. When he was finished, he left a note on the command table written in perfect Vorthak. Your security has been evaluated and found inadequate. Please consider improving your defenses. A friend. By morning, the entire Vorthak Southern offensive had collapsed into chaos. Units were lost. Supplies were missing. Officers could not contact their subordinates. What should have been a coordinated assault turned into a collection of confused individual groups wandering around the countryside. Commander Vostek found his officers tied up in their own command center, alive but deeply humiliated. The note left behind made him want to roar with rage and hide in shame at the same time. "How?" General Krexthar demanded when he heard the report. "How did one primitive soldier defeat 500 of our best guards?" Vostek had been asking himself the same question. "Sir, I believe we have been thinking about this wrong. The humans do not fight like any species we have encountered before." Explain. "All of our military doctrine is based on strength meeting. Strength. We study our enemies' armies and plan to defeat them in battle. The humans do not care about our armies. They attack our ability to coordinate, our supply lines, our communications. They make our strength irrelevant." While Sergeant O. Taejin was making the Vorthak command structure fall apart, Corporal Yoon Minji was solving a different problem. Vorthak air support had been dominating the skies above Zelos Prime. Their aircraft were faster and better armed than anything the Council forces had. Traditional air defense required expensive missiles and radar systems. Humans had something else: patience and precision. Minji found a hill that overlooked the main Vorthak air base. She set up a sniper position with clear lines of sight to the runway. Then she waited. Vorthak pilots were skilled, but they followed predictable patterns. They took off and landed the same way every time. They flew the same routes to and from their targets. They never varied their procedures. Minji did not try to shoot down aircraft in flight. That would have been nearly impossible with the weapons she had. Instead, she targeted them when they were most vulnerable. During takeoff, aircraft moved in straight lines at predictable speeds. Pilots were focused on their instruments and did not expect ground threats. Minji waited until each aircraft reached the exact moment when it was committed to flight, but had not yet gained enough altitude to maneuver. Her first shot penetrated the cockpit of a Vorthak bomber just as it left the ground. The aircraft crashed at the end of the runway, blocking it for hours. Her second shot disabled the engine of a fighter as it tried to take off. The pilot ejected safely, but the plane was destroyed. After the third aircraft was lost during takeoff, Vorthak pilots became nervous. They changed their procedures, trying to make themselves harder targets. But every change they made gave Minji new information about their capabilities and limitations. She adapted faster than they did. Within a week, the Vorthak air base was effectively shut down. Pilots refused to fly missions because they knew that taking off meant facing an invisible enemy who never missed. Dr. Park Suna interviewed the captured Vorthak pilots and found something disturbing. They were not just defeated, they were traumatized. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds were afraid to get into their own aircraft. "She is not a soldier," one pilot told Dr. Suna through a translator. "She is a death spirit. She appears where death is needed and vanishes when her work is done." Dr. Suna realized that humans were not just winning through superior tactics. They were winning through psychological warfare that their enemies could not understand or counter. The most disturbing example came when Private Nam Jiwan was assigned to disrupt Vorthak's supply operations. Instead of attacking convoys directly, she began leaving signs that convoys had been attacked. She would intercept a supply truck, remove exactly half of its cargo, and replace it with notes saying, "Payment for safe passage." The drivers were never harmed. The vehicles were never damaged, but the psychological effect was devastating. Vorthak logistics officers could not understand what was happening. Supplies were disappearing, but there were no signs of battle. Drivers reported meeting polite humans who spoke perfect Vorthak and asked for specific items from their manifest. "It was like paying taxes to a government we could not see," one driver reported. The Vorthak military leadership found this more frightening than open combat. They understood strength and violence. They did not understand an enemy that turned warfare into a psychological game. Captain Lee Ji-ho watched the results of his soldiers' work from his command post. The Vorthak invasion was falling apart, but not in any way that military textbooks described. There were no great battles, no heroic charges, no epic confrontations between opposing armies. Instead, the enemy was simply becoming ineffective. Their communications failed, their supplies disappeared, their soldiers became afraid to leave their bases. The mighty Vorthak war machine was grinding to a halt because humans had identified its weak points and attacked them systematically. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called after only 4 weeks of warfare on Zelos Prime. In the Council's history, no conflict had ever been resolved so quickly. Most wars between major powers lasted years, sometimes decades. Ambassador Kong Minho sat in the human section and watched as delegates from across the galaxy filed into the great meeting hall. Their faces showed confusion, concern, and something else that made him uncomfortable. Fear. High Counselor Merthaden called the session to order. The ancient being's crystalline form pulsed with colors that indicated deep distress. Members of the Council, we are here to discuss events on Zelos Prime that have unprecedented implications for galactic security. Elder Thisara appeared in the center of the hall. Her ethereal form seemed more solid than usual, as if the gravity of the situation had given her physical weight. The Vorthak Empire has requested an immediate ceasefire. They are prepared to withdraw all forces from Zelani territory and pay reparations for the invasion. Murmurs filled the hall. The Vorthak had never surrendered to anyone. In 200 years of expansion, they had never even considered retreat. Furthermore, Thisara continued, they have requested formal non-aggression treaties with several Council member species. Specifically, they have asked for guarantees that humanity will never be deployed against them in any future conflict. The murmurs became loud discussions. Delegates turned to stare at Ambassador Minho, who felt like a specimen under examination. Admiral Zekthara of the Nexus Coalition stood up. Her blue skin had patterns that shifted when she was agitated, and right now those patterns were moving very quickly. Council members, we need to discuss what happened on Zelos Prime. The reports we have received are disturbing. Display the evidence, High Counselor Merthaden ordered. The hall's main screen activated, showing Dr. Park Suna's final report. Her image appeared looking tired and shaken. Behind her, the peaceful landscape of Zelos Prime stretched to the horizon. This is Dr. Park Suna of Earth, her recorded voice began. Scientific observer attached to human forces during the Zelos Prime conflict. What I am about to report will sound impossible, but I have documented everything. The report continued with video footage that made the Council delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. They watched Private Nam Jiwan infiltrate a Vorthak command post alone and disable an entire battalion without firing a shot. They saw Corporal Yoon Minji shut down enemy air operations from a single sniper position. They observed Sergeant O. Tajin walk through defenses that should have been impregnable. The human military operates on principles that other species do not understand, Dr. Suna's voice explained over the footage. They do not seek to overpower their enemies. Instead, they identify weaknesses in enemy operations and exploit them with surgical precision. Admiral Zekthara paused the display. These tactics are... She struggled to find words. They are beyond anything in our military databases. General Corks of the Titan Union stood up. His massive frame towered over the other delegates. The humans use deception, infiltration, and psychological manipulation. These are not honorable ways of warfare. Ambassador Minho felt obligated to respond. With respect, General, there is nothing dishonorable about using intelligence and adaptation in combat. These are survival skills that all species should understand. Survival skills? High Counselor Merthaden's crystalline form flashed with sharp colors. Ambassador, your species demonstrated capabilities that border on the terrifying. The display resumed, showing the most disturbing footage of all. It was a recording from inside a captured Vorthak base where 50 elite warriors had been found unconscious, stripped of weapons, and arranged in neat rows. None of them were injured. All of them were alive. But when they woke up, they refused. To continue fighting, Dr. Suna's voice provided commentary. Human soldiers demonstrate an understanding of warfare that appears to be instinctive. They analyze enemy psychology, identify pressure points, and apply exactly the right amount of force to achieve their objectives. They treat combat not as violence, but as applied psychology. The recording showed interviews with captured Vorthak soldiers. Even through the translation devices, their trauma was obvious. "They are not soldiers," one Vorthak warrior said, his voice shaking. "They are predators. They hunt minds, not bodies." Another prisoner was even more disturbed. "We prepared to fight. An army. Instead, we faced ghosts who knew our thoughts before we thought them." Elder Thisara gestured for the display to stop. Dr. Suna's report raises serious questions about human military capabilities. More concerning are her conclusions about what we observed. A new section of the report appeared on screen. This one was classified at the highest levels, but the council leadership had decided that all members needed to see it. "Based on my observations," Dr. Suna's voice continued, "the human forces deployed to Zelos Prime were operating under significant restrictions." Captain Lee Jiho confirmed that his soldiers were forbidden from using several categories of weapons and tactics that they had brought from Earth. The implications hit the council like a physical blow. What they had witnessed was not humanity at full capability. It was humanity being restrained. Captain Jiho informed me that human military doctrine includes concepts that he felt were inappropriate for this conflict. When I asked for specifics, he declined to elaborate. However, he did make one statement that I feel compelled to report. The recording showed Captain Lee Jiho in his command post, looking directly at the camera. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made even the alien delegates feel uncomfortable. Dr. Suna asked me what would happen if humans were fighting for their own survival instead of helping allies. Jiho's voice said clearly. I told her that if this had been Earth under attack, if these had been human civilians being threatened, the Vorthak Empire would no longer exist. The council hall became completely silent. Ambassador Krulthek of the Vorthak Empire stood up, slowly. His reptilian form seemed smaller than usual, diminished by recent events. Honored council members, I must confirm the accuracy of these reports. The human forces demonstrated capabilities that our military analysts cannot explain or counter. His voice became quieter. Our warriors are trained from birth for combat. We have conquered 47 star systems. We have never faced defeat in open warfare. But the humans... He paused. The humans did not fight us. They dismantled us. Admiral Zeke Thara asked the question that everyone was thinking. Ambassador, Krulthek, how many human soldiers did your forces actually encounter in direct combat? None, Krulthek admitted. Our casualties were entirely from accidents, equipment failures, and psychological breakdown. No Vorthak warrior ever saw a human during actual fighting. The admission sent shockwaves through the council. The most powerful military force in that region of space had been defeated by an enemy they never actually fought. High Counselor Mirthaden's form pulsed with deep, slow colors that indicated careful thought. Members of the council, we face a situation without precedent. We have discovered a species that appears to have evolved specifically for warfare. Ambassador Minho stood up. With respect, High Counselor, humanity is not a warlike species. We came to Zelos Prime to help peaceful people defend themselves. Our soldiers followed strict rules of engagement and showed remarkable restraint. Restraint? General Corks's voice boomed across the hall. Ambassador, your people psychologically destroyed an entire army without firing more than a few dozen shots. If this is restraint, what does human aggression look like? Minho realized that he could not answer that question in a way that would make the council feel better. Earth's history was filled with wars that had no restraint at all. Conflicts where human creativity and destruction had reached levels that even humans found horrifying. Elder Thisara spoke again. The council must consider the implications of what we have learned. Humanity has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our understanding. More troubling, they have shown that conventional military thinking may be obsolete. Dr. Suna's report included analysis that went beyond the immediate conflict. She had studied human history and found patterns that disturbed her. Humans had been fighting each other continuously for thousands of years. Every human military advancement had come from fighting other humans who were equally creative and adaptable. Human warfare evolved in an environment where both sides possessed equal intelligence and adaptability, her voice explained. This created an arms race of tactics and counter-tactics that has no equivalent in galactic military history. Other species fight wars. Humans have been perfecting the art of war. The most disturbing section of the report dealt with human military technology. Dr. Suna had been given access to equipment that Captain Jiho's forces had brought but not used. Human weapons are designed with a level of destructive efficiency that suggests a species that has devoted considerable resources to killing other humans, she reported. More concerning, their tactical doctrines include scenarios for warfare against opponents with equal or superior technology. They have planned for conflicts that the galaxy has never seen. Admiral Zekthera stood up again. Council members, we must address the central question. Archivist Prime Velthoris moved through the vast data chambers of the Galactic Council's central library. Her species, the Keepers, had maintained galactic records for over 3,000 years. She had cataloged wars, peace treaties, first, contacts, and extinctions, but nothing in her experience compared to what she was recording today. Resolution 2847 lay before her in its final form. The document was short, but its implications would echo through galactic history for centuries to come. She read it one more time before entering it into the permanent record. By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, with one abstention, the following restrictions are hereby enacted. No member species shall initiate military action against humanity without Council approval. No member species shall request human military assistance without unanimous Council consent and extreme justification. This resolution is enacted for the protection and stability of galactic civilization. Velthoris paused at her work terminal. In 3 millennia of record-keeping, she had never seen a resolution that prohibited a species from fighting because they were too effective at it. The official vote count showed the reality. 847 votes in favor, 0 votes against, 1 abstention from Earth. Every single species in the galaxy, except humanity, had voted to restrict humanity's military involvement in galactic affairs. She began typing the historical context that future scholars would need to understand this moment. The Zelos Prime conflict had lasted exactly 28 standard days. The Vorthak Empire had surrendered unconditionally despite overwhelming numerical superiority. Human casualties, 0 deaths, 3 minor injuries. Vorthak casualties, 0 deaths, 847 psychological breakdowns, complete military collapse. On Earth, General Shin Daehan sat in his office at the Global Defense Headquarters and read the translated text of Resolution 2847. Around him, holographic displays showed Earth's actual military capabilities, systems, and strategies that the galactic community had never seen. He laughed quietly to himself. The aliens were afraid of what humans had shown them on Zelos Prime. They had no idea what humans were really capable of. Colonel Park Dong-yun, his aide, looked up from his own display. Sir, the Council thinks what they saw was human military doctrine. Apparently so, Daehan replied. Captain Jiho's people were operating under peacekeeping rules of engagement. No lethal force unless absolutely necessary. No civilian targets, no weapons of mass destruction, no psychological warfare beyond basic intimidation. And they still won decisively. They didn't win, Daehan corrected. They ended the war. There's a difference. On the screens around them, Earth's real military preparations continued. Weapons that could crack planets. Strategies designed to fight enemies with technology centuries in advance of human capabilities. Contingency plans for conflicts that would make the Zelos Prime operation look like a training exercise. Dr. Bae Hyejin worked in her laboratory deep beneath the Korean peninsula. Her official title was Director of Defensive Technology Research. Her real job was preparing humanity for the day when their restraint might not be enough. The samples she studied came from dozens of alien species encountered during humanity's brief time in galactic society. Genetic material, biological vulnerabilities, technological weaknesses. Information gathered through diplomatic exchanges and scientific cooperation. The aliens saw this as normal cultural exchange. Dr. Bae saw it as intelligence gathering for conflicts that might come in the future. Computer, run simulation 447, she said to her AI assistant. The holographic display showed a theoretical conflict between humanity and a coalition of galactic species. The parameters included human forces operating without restraint, using weapons, and tactics that Captain Jiho's people had been forbidden to employ. The simulation lasted 18 minutes. At the end, galactic civilization had ceased to exist. Note for the record, Dr. Bay said quietly. Current human military capability remains at Level 1 restriction protocols. Recommend maintaining peaceful diplomatic relations with all galactic species. Back in the council chambers, Ambassador Kang Minho received a personal message from High Counselor Merthaden. The crystalline being wanted a private conversation away from the formal procedures and recording devices. They met in Merthaden's personal chambers, a room filled with artifacts from thousands of different worlds. The High Counselor's form pulsed with colors that indicated deep concern. Ambassador, Merthaden began, I must ask you directly, what we saw on Zelos Prime, was that truly humanity operating under restraint? Minho considered his answer carefully. The truth might cause panic. A lie might be discovered later with worse consequences. Yes, he said finally. Captain Jiho's forces were under strict orders to minimize casualties and use only conventional tactics. They were forbidden from employing several categories of weapons and strategies that human military doctrine includes. What categories? Minho thought about nuclear weapons, biological warfare, orbital bombardment, total war strategies, and dozens of other concepts that would terrify peaceful alien species. Categories that we hope will never be necessary, he said diplomatically. Merthaden's colors shifted to patterns that indicated fear. Ambassador, your species has been welcomed into galactic society. We hope that friendship will be sufficient to ensure that those categories remain theoretical. So do we, High Counselor. Humans prefer peace. But we have learned that being prepared for war is often the best way to maintain peace. After Minho left, Merthaden composed a personal message to every member of the council leadership. The message was classified at the highest possible level and would never appear in official records. Based on my conversation with the human ambassador, the message read, I believe Resolution 2847 is insufficient. We have not restricted a dangerous species. We have identified one. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol Omega, diplomatic isolation combined with technological monitoring. Humanity must never be allowed to feel threatened by galactic civilization. Captain Lee Jiho, now promoted to colonel, returned to Earth as a hero, but his debriefing sessions with military leadership were classified beyond the highest security levels. The aliens fight wars like games, he told the gathered generals and admirals. They have rules, honor codes, and predictable strategies. They've never faced an enemy that treats warfare as a survival skill rather than a formal contest. General Shin Daehan leaned forward. Assessment of galactic military capabilities? Individually, many species have technology superior to ours, Jiho replied, but they lack tactical flexibility and psychological adaptability. They've been at peace for so long that they've forgotten how to truly fight. Could they threaten Earth if they united against us? Jiho thought about the question for a long moment. Sir, they could destroy our cities and kill millions of our people, but they could not defeat humanity. We would adapt, survive, and eventually destroy them all. The room fell silent. Every person present understood the implications. Humanity had been welcomed into galactic civilization as a minor species, but they were potentially the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Park Suna published her official report 6 months after returning from Zelos Prime. The public version was heavily edited and focused on xenobiological observations. The classified version became required reading for every intelligence agency on Earth. Her conclusions were stark. Galactic military doctrine is based on the assumption that warfare is a formal competition between organized forces. Human military evolution occurred in an environment where survival required constant adaptation and innovation. This fundamental difference makes humans nearly unbeatable in actual combat situations. The most disturbing section of her report dealt with alien psychology. Galactic species view warfare as an extension of politics. Humans view warfare as an extension of hunting. This psychological difference is insurmountable and makes human military tactics fundamentally incomprehensible to alien minds. 1 year after Zelos Prime, the warning was issued. It went out on all galactic communication networks, translated into every known language, and distributed to every world in Council space. The message was simple. Galactic Council Advisory Notice 2847 Alpha. Military actions involving or against the species known as humans require immediate notification to Council authorities. Caution: human military capabilities exceed standard threat assessment parameters. For galactic security, avoid military confrontation with human forces. On the Vorthak homeworld, the message was received with grim understanding. General Krexthar, now retired in disgrace, read the warning and nodded slowly. His warriors, who had survived Zelos Prime, still woke, up screaming from nightmares about invisible enemies and impossible defeats. Too late, he said to himself. We already learned this lesson. Across the galaxy, military leaders read the warning and wondered what it meant. Most dismissed it as political posturing. A few began studying the classified reports from Zelos Prime. Those few began to understand why the Council was afraid. Captain Lee Jiho continued training human soldiers at the Global Defense Academy. When new recruits asked about the alien warning, his response was always the same. We helped some. Friends defend their home. That's what humans do. We protect people who can't protect themselves.